What's going on, everyone? Brad here, and welcome to part 2 of the Damascus Everyday Carry Knife. If you didn't see the last video, what I did was get it all forged up. It's 205 layer Damascus, got it ground, quenched, tempered, all that stuff, threw it into the etch, and then we blackened it just a little bit more with coffee. Pretty interesting process. So far, this knife has been a whole ton of fun. On this video, I'm gonna go ahead and get it handled up. Now, I just got a small shipment of lumber for handle material. What I got was some black walnut, well actually curly black walnut. It's pretty cool stuff, I don't really see it too often. And then I also got some flame birch. This knife will have a flame birch handle. I've never worked with it before, and I'm anxious to see how it goes. Now the pattern in flame birch is pretty cool. It's similar to, I guess, curly maple, but much more spread out and larger curls, I guess you would call them, or flames in this case for the flame birch. But it's a real cool wood. I've seen it a lot in furniture, not so much in handle material. I think that's because the pattern's a little bit more spaced out. So it's hard to get that full pattern that you see in maybe a piece of furniture shrunk down into one little handle. You might only get a small streak or two of the actual flame pattern. But I'm gonna do my best to pick the best piece that I can out of the 4 boards that I have here, and hopefully we get a real nice piece that'll look good on the handle. so I got this birch all sanded up. It is nice and smooth, and I'm just loving the way that this feels in the hand. Now I've got a little bit of a different technique here for handle finishing. This is actually gonna be dyed dark brown, and I'm not just gonna be using a standard wood stain. What I'm gonna be doing is using some dark brown leather dye mixed with some denatured alcohol. Now I can't say that I've really seen this technique used in knife handles before, maybe it has, but this is a very common technique for dyeing briar tobacco pipes. Now I'm just using the Fiebing's leather dye, and again, this is dark brown. I'm just kind of mixing this by eye here. I'm also making a mess on the table, but I'm just going with about 1 part leather dye and about 10 parts or so denatured alcohol. Leather dye by itself is just way too sticky. Man, I'm making a mess here. Way too sticky. I should get a funnel, but that's too late now. This leather dye is just, it goes on a little bit too thick, and it's gonna be rubbing off onto your hands for the longest time if it's not watered down a little bit. Besides the mess on the workbench, I'd say this is looking pretty good. It seems like a pretty good consistency. It's really thinned out from that alcohol, and that's just gonna help it penetrate that wood a little bit better, and it's not gonna be as thick and sticky on the surface of the wood. So I'm just using a cotton swab. I'm gonna go ahead and start throwing this on. I'll do about 2 or 3 coats with this. I'm gonna expect the grain to be lifting up just a little bit, so I'm gonna wanna sand in between. And this leather dye is already alcohol based, so adding a little bit of denatured alcohol is not gonna really hinder its application at all. This is actually bringing out some of that flame birch pattern. And this is a really nice piece. You can see that I've got a couple really solid, I guess, flames in here. And I can feel this grain starting to lift in here a little bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and sand that off. This is a good way to see that your dye is actually really penetrating your wood, because if it's not, it'll come off right away, but you can tell it's really struggling to come off of this wood. So we've got a nice deep penetration here with the dye. I'll get this buffed in, and this should help protect the handle and give it a nice shiny and smooth finish. Well, the handle's turning out pretty nicely. I've got a little bit more buffing to do. I want to bring up the shine just a little bit more. Before that, I'm going to throw a secondary bevel onto this blade, get it nice and sharp. I'm going to do that with a 220 grit belt on the grinder. All right, so long story short, I just was not very happy with the handle on this knife. So I went ahead and I cut the scales off, and then I got another piece of that flame birch that just had much nicer grain, and I am loving these results. I'm so happy that I went ahead and I redid that. You know, you're not always gonna get everything perfect the first go around. Sometimes you're gonna have to backtrack, and I'm so happy that I did here because the results are much nicer than they were before. And through trial and error and making mistakes and experimenting, you know, worst case scenario, I end up having to scrap an entire blade. That's not that big of a deal, and if that's, you know, the worst thing that happens to me in my day, I don't really have much to complain about because I love making knives anyway. All in all, I'm really happy with the results on this new handle. I reprofiled it just a little bit, but the grain is just so much nicer than the first piece. I had a great time making this one. I'm just loving the way that this came out, and I'm so happy with the blackened Damascus from that coffee etch in part 1, and then the dyed flame birch. I think it just looks sweet. Let me know what you guys think about this build. Drop some comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm so excited to get this thing shipped out. I'm gonna go get started on making the sheath. I'm not gonna film the process because I do have a lot of sheath videos on the channel that I've uploaded recently. I'll have at least one of those sheath videos linked down below in case you're interested. This blade's gonna be shipping to Norway. I'm so excited about that. And I wanna thank you all so much again for your continued support. If you skipped over part 1 and you wanna see it, I'll have it linked down below. That way you can find it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.